Okay, just 2 enemies left and this stupid tower is almost over. Oh, right, I should say hello and welcome first. Yeah, this is Alchemistexe, and this is the end of the Xeno Tower, and this has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the Phantom of the Kill units, particularly the Killer Princesses. Now, this is not going to be a unit review. This is going to be more of like a discussion about the units as a whole in their elements, like the role that they play, and whether or not it's a good idea to use elemental shards on them, and like what future competition, current and future competition for the roles might be. So we're just going to go killer princess by killer princess, and that will be that. That's always weird overlay with those numbers. It gets me every time. But yeah, so I need to explain a little bit more, so I'm just going to show some footage of Dark Masamune and some fire units killing stuff. Okay, so first things first, about the god killers. Like Tiferet, Failnaught, Cassiet, and I guess Lisa Knot is not technically a god killer, but she's like built the same way as the god killers, so let's just throw her in that group too. I'm not going to be talking about them because I think that that's a given, that if you are lucky enough to have them or planned well enough to have them, then you should use them. They're probably going to be worth your shards. The opportunity cost is, I think, a lot lower. And you don't have to worry about enlightenment, so there's nothing yet for otherworldly shards. So that's why we're just going to be talking about the killer princesses. Like, for example, Lisa Knot and Dark Masamune have a lot of overlap in their kits, and generally speaking, from what I've seen, Lisa Knot can kind of just do everything that Dark Masamune can do, but just scaled up. I don't think that means Dark Masamune sucks. Of all of them, she's the only one I actually max gate 6, and you know she's still solid, but she's just not like crazy top tier. But yeah, so then another thing that I'm not going to cover are the non-killer princesses, like Alchemist. I guess Alchemist is really the only applicable one, or any of the regular POTK units, because for the most part, I don't think many of them are that good outside of maybe really specific niches. Like, I know that regular Artemis is a really good dancer, but that's not really, you know, I still wouldn't necessarily recommend using elemental shards there unless you just had, like, you know, more than you could ever count. Regular Tyrfing, though, I definitely recommend raising, but she's a free unit. You can get all the shards you need. If you're able to autoplay the EX plus 1 that drops her shards, you can get a lot of her shards pretty quickly. So she is good. I have her, like, most of her gates maxed in, like, gate 6 up to 4, and she's worth it. She's worth your time and resources, especially because otherworldly stuff is easier to come by. But it doesn't factor into this discussion because the elemental shards aren't applicable. The main point of this video is we're looking at like how, if you have these units or maybe really want them in the future, how worth it is it to you to use elemental shards on them? Like, for example, Dark Masamune here, like, is it worth it for you to use fire shards on her, and like what are the opportunity costs of doing that? So that's what we're going to be looking at. So with that, let's transition to the tables that I've made, and we're going to start with Dark Masamune, and we're going to look at all of that. Okay, so here we are at the table. So all of the killer princesses are going to follow this same format that I made. So the top row is like the direct competition, like who are other limited fire slash units? Like if you want a fire slash unit, who might you use your elemental shards on? And then the next row down is for a future unit who's a slash. So maybe you want to hold off and wait for this unit to come out. Don't know anything about this dude, by the way. I turned the Alchemist Code database site to Japanese and looked for units with slash in their job information. But anyway, the third row down are non-slash limited units that might be competition. Like, say you've already got Asuka and Dark Setsuna, and you just pulled Dark Masamune. Maybe you want to save your fire shards for one of these guys if you didn't have strike or you didn't have magic or whatevs. And then the final one's free-to-play options. So don't use shards on these people, but if you farm them up, they could help your team out a bit. Some of them more than others right now, but other ones like Catanova and Reime are going to get upgrades in the future that'll help bump them up. So yeah, so this, I don't have one answer for should you use your fire shards on Dark Masamune. It depends on what you need. I just wanted to show you what some of the options and what some of the opportunity costs might be in that situation. So yeah, that is it for Dark Masamune. Personally though, I really like her as a unit. Even after she's kind of had a replacement in Lisanot, I've still found her to be helpful in content where, fire is, like, especially in a mono fire team. So yeah, let's move on to Dark Tyrfing. Alright, so technically speaking, Dark Tyrfing is a free unit via challenge board. I don't know, I think that already passed though. If I'm wrong about that and that thing is still up, you should definitely get her, because it's always good to have options even if you don't end up choosing those options. I happened to raise her because I felt kind of set on light, because out of all of these units that we see on the screen that exist in the game right now, I have all of them raised to some degree. Blair I only have at 75, but other than that, the rest of them are all some degree of enlightened. And I had about 500 shards of her lying around, so I said, you know what the heck, let's see what she's made of. So far she's been all right. In terms of direct competition though, like Siba and Siegfried, I would prioritize them above Dark Tyrfing 100%. And that's not even getting into the other ones like Alma or Emil or Minerva. So, that depends on what you have and what you need and what you've already done. So she could be worth your time, but I would definitely prioritize some of those other units first. And then there's also, the POTK unit and the Genesis unit from the future that you might want to save some light shards for. I'm getting to that point because I need to start saving again. But yeah, overall, I think she's a solid unit, but I just wouldn't race to place her ahead of some of the other slashers or just light units in general. Her guts thing is pretty fun though. And in situations in the tower, like this most recent tower, that came in handy a few times. Just beware of buff removal. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Dark Tyrfing. So let's move on to the Thunder element and start with Dark Laevateinn. So, full disclosure, I only have a level 75 Dark Laevateinn, so I can't give like a really good comprehensive opinion. I raised her to 75 way back in the day, before, like right when she first came out, so this was a long time ago. Used her for a while, and then she kind of fell off, and then just never fell back up. Nowadays I use Dry as far as like her direct competition goes. I use Inaku a little bit. I don't have Orion and don't have Sharon raised, but I could see how you could raise them up fairly easily. Especially because both, although they're limited, both Dry and Orion have a 1-a-day hard quest, and then their mementos are a normal pool. So that's kind of nice, whereas, Dark Laevateinn's collab and requires a limited collab memento. Although that's easier to get than some other limited mementos. But I don't know. I've seen her in multiplay, like fully enlightened, like a 95, or I haven't seen a 97 one yet, and I've just never really been that impressed. Like I won't say she's horrible, but shards are only so available, and there's a lot of competition in totality, like Nyx and Roxy, and then people I'm sure are probably eagerly awaiting Dark Julia, and then not to mention Veer in the future. That's going to be the next Templar event, is Veer, so I would definitely make sure you got her all raised and ready for that, especially if you're wanting for Magic. But if you're wanting for Slash, I just think there's better options. You could kind of hold out. Corvus is going to get a job plus not too far from now, along with the other members of Shadow Messiah. So there, I can say I don't recommend it. If I am wrong about this, if like a fully enlightened Dark Laevateinn is awesome, let me know in the comments, because I would like to make sure that my information is correct. I don't want to spread misinformation. But just so far, at least anecdotally, I've just not been in awe of Dark Laevateinn. But now let's take a look at Dark Freikugel. So, as you may have noticed, this table is a lot more empty than the previous ones. That's because she's the same element as Dark Laevateinn, so there's definitely some overlap. And then just looking in the database, in the JP, I just did not see any other Thunder missile units. It's kind of a rare thing. So whether or not you should raise Dark Freikugel, okay, I don't have her for one. But you know, I've fought against her several times in different stages, and I've played alongside them before. So, and her kit's not exactly complicated. She's got like M attack scaling missile attacks that are Thunder, and she does a little bit of CC too. She's sort of Roxanne-esque, I guess, just like with less grenadey. So, if you don't have Roxanne, I would, and you do have Dark Freikugel, I would 100% raise her, because she could kind of be your Roxanne substitute with the added bonus of benefiting from the Letitia buff. But yeah, I guess there's also Lilith to consider. I don't have Lilith. I know that she's a Thunder unit that does missiles with a missile charge up. Seems like she might synergize with both of them decently. But yeah, that's all I can really say. The shard-worthy other damage types, same thing applies. As far as free-to-play options go, I didn't include Edgar on the list. His job plus, or his job 3, is a giant pain to get. But I was mostly just focusing on 5 stars. And then also just, it takes forever to get that job, so I didn't really include it. And he's also more specialized towards anti-human. But he definitely is a good option for Thunder Missile. But there's also Magnus, too. So the chances of getting at least one of them between Dark Freikugel and Roxanne's fairly decent. So I'd probably prioritize Roxanne if I had to pick one. But if you don't have her, there's definitely some good ways to use Dark Freikugel if you're lucky enough to have her. Alright, so now we are done with Thunder. And let's move on to Wind and take a look at Dark Parashu. So another unit that I don't have, Dark Parashu, but she's a Wind / unit. So as far as direct competition goes, right now it's just global units. Red 6 being the one that's most comparable to her, being super berserkers. Xion does slash, not altogether that similar. But global units, it's pretty easy to get their shards. Just getting them can be kind of a pain. Especially they used to be a lot easier to get. Now they're harder to get. But if you do get them, then it's easier to get their shards. So definitely the people that have been playing longer benefit more from that situation. So if you've been shafted on global, then maybe sticking with POTK would be a little bit better. Otherwise, you could wait for Naju, save for him. He seems like he's going to be pretty strong. He's not a Templar, but he's tangential to Templars, so he's higher on my priority list just because good old-fashioned bias. But then when it comes to the non-slashers, I think this is more important than some of the other elements because, like, Dark Nyx, Zwei, and if you're into mega buffing, Tamis or Mashari. And you know, Maka's not bad either. She's got a great leader skill if you really like using like Leonia and you happen to have King or Ramses. If you like piercing. So yeah, I would say in general, Slash is just not that strong except for Setsuna. Setsuna's in a class all her own, but you don't have to worry about win shards for her because you can just farm her up. Every new players get her for free, all that jazz. Balt's alright. He could use some upgrading via Gate 6 and all that. And then Yomi is less alright. Her kit's kind of cool. It's hard to make her do anything effective at present. Hopefully she gets an upgrade in the future because I kind of like the premise of her kit. But yeah, so that's it for this. Now we're going to stay in Wind, but we're going to move on to Dark Artemis. Alright, we are back to a unit that I do have and have raised to some degree. I don't have all her gates maxed or anything, but I definitely think that Dark Artemis is solid. Her main claim to fame is that she's a very durable archer. So she can't hit targets from as far away, and she doesn't buff like crazy like Tamamo does. But like Seda, she can also knock dudes out of the sky, which is always nice. She can also drain back health, which is part of the Aphromain durability, and also shield bypasser. Eualia I don't know too much about. I briefly looked at her thing on the screen. I'm guessing she's going to be really strong, but also a nightmare to get. So maybe wait until after all the Genesis dust is settled. And if you ended up getting lucky on something that you pulled and got her, then great. If not, then you probably just forget about it. And if you've got a lot of the more important things taken care of. Like, just off the top of my head, Dark Nyx would definitely want to be the number one, because you'd have better, or at least comparably good options in free to play with Seda and Tamamo, and Dark Nyx is like the best nuker in the game. So yeah, so I think that should be the priority on your shards. But I'd say if you don't have him, probably not going to get him, and you do have Dark Artemis, then I could see it being worth your while. But I don't want to oversell her at the same time. Like, she's a very solid unit. Not amazing, just solid. So yeah, let's move on to the final unit that we'll be assessing, and that is Dark Longinus. So for Dark Longinus, good news and bad news. The good news is no direct competition. The bad news, lots of indirect competition. I have no water shards. I bet a lot of you don't have water shards. If you're either lucky because you have all these units raised already and somehow still have water shards left over, or if you're really unlucky and that's why you have tons of water shards and you do have Dark Longinus, I could see her being worth your while. There's just not a lot of units like her. Like Ankh, as far as free play options go, Ankh and Lamia, they're very, very solid. Ankh will get some upgrades probably next February, maybe March, depending on how they do it. And then Lamia is very solid as well. I would assume that Dark Longinus outclasses Lamia unless you're doing like reaction 1,000 Knights kind of shenanigans. But in general, yeah, if somehow like there's some freaking amazing units on here, like between Ainz and Emrys and Dark Mirror and Voda, so that's stiff competition. But if that's something you don't have to worry about for whatever reason, then yeah, I would definitely recommend Dark Longinus. So yeah, that is the end of our comparison. So hopefully you learned a little bit about the killer princesses and whether or not they're worth it. You know, for everybody, your mileage may vary, and then most important, you can literally disregard everything I've said for however many minutes I've been talking. That if you love one of these units, like who was I kind of bad mouthing, like Dark Tyrfing or no, Dark Laevateinn. That was the one that I was totally just raining on her parade. If she is like your girl, you love her, man, raise her, enlighten her, use your otherworldly shards. Like, don't let like what's numerically the best option get in the way of the best option for you having fun. Like, it's a game, and it's really, really important to not forget that, because games should be fun. We should all be having fun. Like, the goal that I have is to help all of you guys have more fun. Like, if you're the kind of person who wants to like weigh options and look at opportunity costs, I can help you do that. But I'll never tell you to not have fun. And with that, I will wish all of you a good night, and I will see you guys next time.